Hello everyone, I hope you're all doing well. I'm Angie and welcome to my watercolor video class. Today we are going to do watercolor resist with crayons. And this is just a real fun and easy technique, gives you some really fun backgrounds that you could use to make other things. So we're going to get started. I'm going to give you a list of things that we need to have first. First thing is watercolor paper. Now when I purchase my watercolor paper, I purchase it in a big pad like this. And then I take one piece of this and I cut it into 4 individual pieces. So this is the size that we're going to work on today. Now watercolor paper has a rough side and a smooth side. So you can work on either side. It all depends on if you like that rough texture look. If you don't and you want more of a smooth look, then use the smooth side of the paper. We're also going to need a cup of water to rinse your brush in. We're going to need some crayons, and it can be white crayons or colored crayons. You can use either one for this technique. Some paper towels to sop up any mess that you may have. Some blue painter's tape to tape your paper down. Some watercolor brushes, some watercolors, or if you don't have watercolors, you can use some water-based Crayola markers, and I'll show you how to do this in the second one that we're going to do today. So let's get started. The first thing we need to do is tape our watercolor paper down to something. Now this is just a cutting mat that I have, and I'm just going to tape that right down here, and I've kind of got my pieces of tape all here and ready to tape this down. And the reason to tape the watercolor paper down is so when watercolor paper gets really wet, it has a tendency to curl up, and that makes it a little bit hard to work on when that happens. So you want to tape it down, and painter's tape is about the right consistency so that it doesn't rip the paper when you take it off to tape everything down with. So I'm just going to get all this taped in place. I'm going to just curl that under so it doesn't stick to the underneath there. And I've got one more piece here to cut on. And you just want to make sure that you cover all the edges, and then you just want to make sure that you push it down really well against the edge so that you don't get water seepage underneath there. Okay, we've got that all taped down. Now the next thing we're going to do is take our crayon and draw on it. Now you can draw shapes, you can draw just about anything on here. You could give a piece to a child and let them draw a picture and then paint over the top of it, which I think would be really fun. We're going to start with just a white crayon because I love the look that this creates. And I'm not going to draw a shape, I'm actually just going to scribble all over this. Now I have learned in doing this that you need to press a little bit harder with the crayon. You can't press real light, or when you watercolor over it, you're not going to see the resist as well. So we're going to just take, and I'm just going to take and press kind of hard, and I'm going to just scribble all over this. Now I realize with a white crayon, it's kind of hard to see. So if you tip it in the light, you can kind of see where your marks are. And I need like something right in there. Okay, that works. So we're going to set our crayons aside, and we're going to start watercoloring over this. Now when I watercolor, I like to get the paper wet first. To me, it allows the colors to blend really nicely together. So this is just a bigger brush that I use to get my paper wet. It's not really a watercolor brush or anything like that. It's just a bigger size paintbrush. And you just want to get a nice coat. And because I'm working on the rough side, I like to do a coat in each direction so that this will get the paper good and wet. Then I'm going to set that brush off to the side, and I'm going to pick up a little bit smaller paintbrush. And when I work with my paints, I like to what I do call prime my paints. So before I start watercoloring with them, I actually spritz some water in each of the wells that I want to use. So you can either just drip water in, or if you have like a little eyedropper, you can use that to just drop some water in there. And that just gets the paints ready to use so that you're not spending so much time trying to get the water moving. So this first one, we're going to work in a rainbow order. We are going to just start dabbing our paint on there. And we're going to let that run just a little bit. Now, rainbow color order is Roy B. Viv. Roy B. Goodness sakes. Why can't I remember that? Roy G. Biv. So red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and violet. So I'm just going to add a little bit more red in here. All right, now we're going to go into our orange. So we're just going to dab some orange in there, and then I'm going to pick my board up, and this is why I like to work on a board that I can move around. I can add some more water in between here and kind of try and force those colors to blend into each other a little bit. Now you're going to see that your paper is going to bubble up a little bit with all this water on it. That's another reason why we tape the paper down. When the paper dries and it's taped like this, it'll actually dry flat back down to the surface that it's taped to. So it just makes it easier. Okay, so I'm going to pick this up again. And you can see how that orange is now running into the yellow, and it kind of creates colors that come in between there. Now you can see down here I've got some drips of water going. This is where your paper towels come in. I'm just going to dab some of that off. And I've got some pooling up here. So this, I'm just going to get rid of some of that water. Okay, now we're going to go into the green. And again, I'm just dabbing that on there. And you can see once the paint hits that watered surface that it starts to almost bleed or wick out into the paper. And again, I'm going to pick that up and I'm going to let that green move down into the yellow a little bit. And to me, this is the fun part of watercolor, is just letting the water and the paint do its thing. Alright, now we're going to go back down and add the blue. So I'll add a little bit more blue in here. And you can already see where I've got the crayon, that the crayon is resisting that watercolor. So those white lines are going to start popping. So again, I'm going to let that run. And then I am going to switch that around this way and let it run down that way a little ways. Okay, so last color is the purple. This is kind of a bluey purple. I'm going to try this one over here. That's a little bit more purple. So again, I'm going to pick that up. I'm going to let the colors run. And if you want them to run a little bit more than they are, you can always come in and add some water to it and just let it do its thing. Although I don't want it to do quite that. So I'm just going to, again, this is kind of where your paper towels, you can just kind of dab lightly at the edges. I'm just going to wick that back up a little bit there. And where I wiped there, you've got that line, you can kind of just come back in with your brush and just smooth that out just a little bit. And then I'm going to just go along the edge quick and grab up any of that excess water. Okay, so there is our first one. So you can kind of see, and they'll pop a little bit more when the paper is dry, but you can see where my crayon is there. So that's, the watercolor is not sticking to that area. So this one is done. We're going to set this aside and just let it dry. So this one, I wanted to show you one where I actually used colors instead of just a white crayon. And this one, I'm going to show you how to use markers. So this is just a piece of plastic. And we're going to take our Crayola markers and we're just going to scribble some of the color onto this plastic piece. So if you're looking for a plastic piece at home, think about like the cover of a Cool Whip container or something that you don't care if you get marker on it. You don't want to use it for food again after you've put marker and stuff on it. So once you designate it as a craft purpose plastic, then I would just leave it as that. And it doesn't have to be real big, thick markers like this. If you have thinner markers at home, you just don't want to use a solvent-based marker like a Sharpie or something like that. It has to be something that's kind of a water-based marker. Okay, so this is going to work just like your watercolor paints do. They're not going to be as dark because they don't have as much pigment in as the watercolors do. So again, I'm going to get my paper wet. I'm just going to get this good dose of water on there. Just dry that off a little bit. And then I'm going to go in and again I'm going to start adding colors. And again, I think I'm going to kind of do a rainbow order with this. And this time, instead of dropping color in, I'm actually going to brush it on. But you can see almost immediately that these are going to be quite a bit lighter in color. The thing I like about this though is if you want more of a pastel look, that's what markers are going to give you. It's not going to be nearly as dark as the other piece or as quite as vibrant in color as the other piece that we did. But it gives you a beautiful pastel looking wash. So we're going to add some green to this. Oh, I need a little bit more green on my brush. And watercolor always dries back a little bit lighter, which means that when it's dry, the color is going to be lighter than it appears when it's wet. So we're just going to add some blue in here. And then I'm going to finish with some purple. Now you can always go back over this and add in some more color just to make it a little bit darker. I usually try to get, you want to still make sure your paper's wet. And you can brush up into the previous color to kind of blend those colors together. So again, I'm going to just add some of this in here. That green is pretty light. Add more green. And a little bit more of this blue. Go up into the green a little bit and back down. Go into the purple. So there, a nice, more soft and pastel look. And here I'll grab the other one so we have kind of comparison. It's not quite as dark as the other one, but you still get a nice color range using the markers. So that's another fun thing to do. I've noticed that I've got some bleed going here, so I'm just going to sop that up with my paper towel a little bit. And sometimes it pays to just wipe along the edges here when you're done, just to kind of keep that water from pooling. So that's our second one, and we're going to set that aside and let that dry as well. So this third one I've already prepped and got it ready to go. I'm also going to set this out of the way. So this one, what I did is I took and drew some circles on here. And how I drew the circles is I had this stencil that I was using for a paint project. As you can see, it's kind of full of paint, but it was still holding up. And I just laid this down and took my white crayon and drew circles all over the page. So this one, we're also going to add some color to. And again, I'm going to get my paper wet. Now, if you don't want your colors to blend so much, say you just want to have, you know, straight color on there. If you just paint straight onto the paper is going to wick up that color right away. And your paint is pretty much going to stay where you put it. So if that's the look that you want, then don't add the water. I just really like how watercolors bleed together, so that's my favorite way of doing it. Okay, so this one, we're going to actually take, I'm going to blend a color up here in the mixing tray. I want some of this green, but I don't want it to be quite as dark as it is. So I'm going to take and I'm going to add some white to it. Now I will tell you a little bit of color theory. When you're mixing colors on your watercolor project, colors that are next to each other on the color wheel are going to blend well together. Colors that are directly opposite each other on the color wheel are going to make brown or mud. So if you try and mix yellow and purple together, it's going to be brown. If you try and mix green and red and green together, that's going to be brown. But complementary colors such as yellow, red, and blue, we know if they mix together, they're going to make green. And if red and blue mix together, they're going to be in the purple family. So those colors are okay to put next to each other. So just keep that in mind when you're doing your projects. Alright, so I've got my wash of color on here. I think this one we're going to do some blues, greens, and purples. And see how that spreads out when you add that? And this time I'm just going to drop colors in. I'm not going to go in any specific order. I'm just going to drop colors in different areas. I'm going to go into that light blue again because I really like that. And we've got some purple going down here. We'll add some more of our lighter green up here. And you can see I'm kind of just swirling the colors in there. No particular rhyme or reason to how I'm adding these. And again, you can pick your board up and kind of let the colors run a little bit together. But you can see where my circles are just popping off the page there where I put the white crayon. Again, I've got some bleed going down there. And I'm going to just kind of dab. I don't want that to go quite so much into there. Okay, it looks like we need just a little bit more purple. Let's put some more purple there. And I'm going to darken that blue up just a little bit. I'm going to add a little bit darker blue in there and just kind of mix it right on my paper. Add some little darker blue down here. And the key is knowing when to stop. You don't want to overdo it because you want the colors to kind of mix together. And as it sits and dries, those colors are going to actually move some more. They're going to move into each other. So I'm just going to kind of force these two colors to mix together, and that's going to create a whole nother color. And the same thing here. I'm just going to kind of take a wet brush and move it back and forth into that area. And then I'm going to add just a little bit more of my green in here because I want that to be a little bit darker than it is. Okay, now again I'm going to pick up my board and I'm going to let things run just a little bit. And when I want it to stop running, then I'm going to move it the other direction and let it go a different direction. And again, where you see puddles of water, go ahead and sop those up. And then I'm going to let it go this way a little bit. just touch those bigger puddles there and let that go back again. All right, so that is Watercolor Crayon Resist. Okay, so we're going to set that aside again and let it dry. And I'm going to show you some examples of some other ones that I had done previously so you can get some ideas of what to do for designs. I'm going to set that there, let it dry. Okay, so these are some of the examples that I had made previously. This one again, I pretty much, not really scribbled, but I drew definitive lines on the paper. This one, I had drawn some swirls with a white crayon. Now, I must have not pressed super hard, but you can still see the design. I'm going to push that up there a little bit. Hopefully you can see that. This one, I just drew dots of white on the paper. And so it made kind of a polka dot paper. This one here, I drew lines so that it would form triangles, or not triangles, diamonds. So just took my ruler, drew some lines, and made that shape. This is one of the first ones I did, where I just scribbled all over the paper. I didn't really care for this green area, but I think I'll just cut that off and I'll use this portion of the paper. This one again I used just colors. I didn't fill in the hearts, but just left them open and did this with the Crayola markers. And then I thought, what would it look like if you did a black crayon? And I kind of really like this effect. It kind of reminds me of stained glass. So use a bunch of different things that you have. It doesn't have to be white crayon. And then I also wanted to show you these. So once you've got all these papers, you're probably thinking, okay, now what am I going to do with them? So here's some ideas of what to do with those. So the last craft video we made Post-it note holders. So I took one of the pieces of watercolor paper and I just made sure it was long enough to make a Post-it note holder with. And so I took one of the papers and made a Post-it note holder. So this was the paper that I created. And again, it was just hearts in a rainbow order for the paint. So that's one thing that you can do. And by the way, this video is still up on our YouTube channel, the Cannon Falls Library YouTube channel. So if you want to know how to make that, find that video. Of course, working in a library, you can make a bookmark. So this was just a pre-purchased bookmark that I found at the craft store, just plain white, and I just cut down my watercolor paper and then took some die-cut letters and just glued those on there and put a little piece of ribbon in there so you could make a bookmark with them. Or you could make a greeting card. So again, this was a paper that I drew hearts on, and then I had watercolored washed over it, and then I just took a piece of white cardstock and made it into a card. And then again I had some die cut words up there and a heart punch that I owned, so I just punched out some hearts out of the scrap pieces of watercolor and then just glued it all up to make a greeting card. So those are some of the things you can do with your papers once they're dry. Alright, so this is the first part in a three-part series of watercolor classes. So the first was the Crayon Resist, and that's what we did today. The next class is going to be watercolor with tape. So these are some of the papers that I made using that. So this class is going to be up next Thursday, May 21st at 5:30. Again, you can find it on our Facebook page or the YouTube channel, either one. I'll have a link to it from our website, so look in the top area of the website where everything scrolls across. You can just click the arrow and find that and then click and it will take you to the YouTube channel. So that is what we're going to do in the next class. So I want to thank everybody for joining me for this class. I hope you had fun. I hope you go home and play with all of this and have a really good time. Again, stay well. We hope to see you soon at the library. Hopefully our doors will open soon. Again, take care and thanks for joining me. Have a good day. Bye.